Yo, what's going on, guys? My name is Alex, and today I want to talk about the play-in tournament. In case you guys were living under a rock, the play-in tournament has officially started a couple days ago, and we've had some really exciting games. However, as a lot of you have probably known, during the Pelicans-Lakers game with about 3 minutes left into the game, Zion unfortunately left the game with a hamstring injury. And then, of course, just the other night as well, we had the Philadelphia 76ers versus the Miami Heat. And yet again, we had another star player get injured in Jimmy Butler, and we now know that he has a MCL sprain, and he as well is going to be missing the next couple of weeks. I wanted to talk about the play-in tournament, but not necessarily what has happened in these games, but I wanted to talk about just the idea of the play-in tournament, because I'm going to be honest, when the play-in tournament was first introduced in 2020, I absolutely love the idea, and I think it brings some very exciting basketball. In the past 4 seasons, we've had some really iconic moments, including Patrick Beverley throwing his jersey into the stands and that whole ordeal. That is one of the most iconic moments from the play-in tournament, but there's several other things like LeBron seeing 3 rims. The play-in tournament has brought some great moments and some really great basketball. However, due to these injuries that have happened to Zion and Jimmy, I can't help but just to have a sour taste on my mouth, even though these games have been actually quite enjoyable this year. And with the sour taste on my mouth, I've kind of come to the realization that the play-in tournament might actually need to leave, and we might actually need to just completely get rid of this idea of the play-in tournament. Let me explain to you why. So I think my biggest issue is that now that these star players like Zion and Jimmy are out, there's a very legitimate chance that these teams like the Miami Heat and Pelicans don't even make the playoffs anymore, because now they're not healthy because of this singular game that if the play-in tournament didn't exist, these teams would have made the playoffs because they were the 7th or 8th seed. Let's just hypothetically say that the play-in tournament just didn't happen this year. The Pelicans were going to be the 7th seed playing the Denver Nuggets in the first round, and I don't want to say Zion wouldn't have gotten injured in this series, but again, this is a completely different series with completely different plays, completely different outcomes. Whatever would happen in this Nuggets series for the Pelicans, it would be completely different than what happened in this Lakers game. So I would like to say that Zion probably wouldn't have gotten injured in that series. However, because the play-in tournament is a thing, the Pelicans now have to play an extra game, even though they just played 82 games in the regular season to prove that they were a playoff team. And in this extra game, now their star player is out. I'm starting to realize that the regular season is the play-in tournament. You get 82 games to prove yourself, to prove that you are worthy of being a playoff team. That's why throughout NBA history, the 8 teams in the conference make the playoffs. Now, I understand why the play-in tournament was made, because again, it started in 2020. That ended up being a shortened year because of COVID, and there were a lot of teams, especially in the Western Conference, that were very close to each other in record. So they played a couple more regular season games, but they said, hey, we're going to do a play-in tournament, and if you deserve to be in this playoffs, then hey, you got to win these play-in tournament games. That completely made sense, and they also had a caveat. So if you were, let's say, the 9th seed, if you were 4 games or under back from the 8th seed, that would have activated the play-in tournament. For example, in that 2020 year, the Portland Trailblazers were 4 games back or under behind the Memphis Grizzlies, and guess what? The Blazers actually ended up winning that game, so they actually ended up making it into the playoffs. However, in that same year, the Orlando Magic were the 9th seed right behind the Washington Wizards, but they were more than 4 games back. I believe they were around 7.5 games back, so they did not make the playoffs because they could not play in the play-in because of that caveat. But now we are back to playing 82 game regular seasons, so now I just don't think that it's really necessary, especially since this caveat doesn't even exist anymore. You make the play-in tournament regardless of your record is, as long as you are in the 9th or 10th seed, and to me, it's a little bit ridiculous. Now, if this 4-game caveat was still in the league right now, it would make sense for the Pelicans to be in this play-in tournament, because the West is completely stacked this year, and there is actually a very close difference between the Pelicans, who are the 7th seed, between the Kings, who are the 9th seed, and even the Warriors. It's very close between these teams. So I would understand doing the play-in tournament, especially since some of these teams would have been dealing with injuries like the Pelicans, and even the Kings now, missing Kevin Huerter or Malik Monk. This makes sense to have the play-in tournament. However, when we look at the Eastern Conference and the Chicago Bulls and the Atlanta Hawks, I'm sorry, but respectfully, these two teams do not deserve to have a chance to make the playoffs. So now that Jimmy Butler is injured, it's the same thing with Zion. Jimmy Butler could have very well just went right into the playoffs. He would have been healthy, and because it's a completely different circumstance, who's to say that he does get injured? Maybe he just stays healthy. And now he's playing against the Boston Celtics healthy in the first round. That's something that we really want. However, because we had to play this extra game to prove ourselves, now Jimmy Butler's out, but now the Heat are going into the Celtics series without Jimmy Butler. And overall, while I do understand that the play-in tournament bring a lot of revenue, we can just look at the stats. We can see that people are watching it more than the regular season. Just in terms of good basketball, I just feel like in the long term, especially when these situations happen, this is just not good for the playoff product. And I also want to add as well that looking back into the play-in tournament, this isn't the only year where I think it has really compromised what the playoffs could potentially look like. To a lesser extent, in 2022, the Clippers went 42-40 and they would have made the playoffs, even with a injury-riddled season with Kawhi and Paul George. However, because the play-in tournament existed, they still had to play their way into the playoffs despite playing the 82 games. And guess what? Paul George went into COVID protocols, which eventually made the Clippers lose in the play-in tournament, so they could not make the playoffs when they would have made it if the play-in tournament did not exist. Now again, this is a Clippers team that does not have Kawhi, but it does have Paul George. So who knows what the Clippers could have done with a Paul George-led team. But it's just examples like these with, just players missing these key games where it's just so unfortunate because we just played 82 games. I feel like these teams have played well enough to make it to the playoffs based off their record, and the fact that they have to play 1 or 2 more games just to solidify everything, I think it's getting a little bit ridiculous. And the injuries that happened this year with Zion and Jimmy Butler, they just shouldn't have happened. These injuries shouldn't have happened if the play-in tournament was not here. And again, this is not to say that they couldn't have gotten injured later. That very well could have happened. However, I would like to be a little bit optimistic and say that these star players don't get injured because I just want what's best for them, right? We don't want to see players injured, but now we're going to have to go and look at an Eastern Conference that is not going to have Jimmy Butler. Donovan Mitchell has been looking very suspect coming back from his injury. Giannis has this calf strain. Joel Embiid looks like he's on one leg. The New York Knicks don't have Julius Randle. So really, it's the Boston Celtics, the Knicks with Brunson, and then the Magic. Those are really the only healthy teams. Oh yeah, and Tyrese Halliburton. He's been dealing with this hamstring injury. I don't think he is really 100% right now, but he's still playing and still pretty good. But again, he's not what he was doing in the beginning of the season before he had that hamstring injury. This Eastern Conference does not look good at all. So having a healthy Jimmy Butler would have at least made things a little bit more interesting, but he's not there anymore. And the same thing with the West. The Pelicans can win and they can make it into the 8th seed. But now we're watching the Thunder beat up a Pelicans team, which I think they would have beat anyway, even with Zion on the team. But now Zion's not there, and to me, it's kind of a foregone conclusion that the Thunder will most likely win that series. So, again, I just want to say that I do enjoy the play-in. I think it has some very good hoops, and it brings a lot of great energy, and I think it's a good opener for what we can expect into the playoffs. However, because of these injuries that we've been having this year with Zion and Jimmy, and looking in past history with the Clippers and Paul George, I just think it might be time to get rid of the play-in tournament, and I don't think the NBA is going to get rid of the play-in tournament. So if they're going to keep the play-in tournament, I think they need to bring back that caveat of having to have a certain amount of games back, so 4 games back to activate the play-in tournament. I think that has to happen, and I think they should also potentially look at making that gap a little bit smaller, maybe 3, 2.5. I'm not really sure, but hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know down below what y'all think. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and sub. Check out my socials down below in the description. You can also check out this video somewhere on the screen. All right, guys, I'll see you on the next one. Peace out.